Okay. Remember what we did yesterday. We focused on the first feather here, the first paragraph of our graphic organizer, to write the introductory paragraph. Today we are going to talk about these three paragraphs that come next, the detailed paragraphs. I realize some of you went on and you worked on it yesterday. That's fine, but I want you to listen though, because there's going to be some things you need to do to go back into those number 2, 3, and 4 paragraphs to add some information. So make sure you're listening. Okay, when you start your second paragraph, you will start out by telling your reader, Vincent, are you listening? Turn your chair all the way around so there you go. And stay facing this way. You need to first tell your reader the topic of the second paragraph, which is our first reason that we're saying that the Pilgrims had it harder than we have it in 2017. And we've got something up, you have something to the effect of Pilgrims face punishment and mistreatment in England. Now, when you go to type your topic sentence, you can choose to copy what we wrote on our organizer if you want. That is a complete sentence. Austin, Aliyah, are you listening? However, it would make your writing even better if you add some things to it so it becomes yours. So yours becomes different. Nope, hands down this whole time that I'm talking. Just listen. Nobody raise your hand, just listen. So you can add extras, adjectives, adverbs. You can break it up into a couple sentences. Remember, you want to vary up your sentences. Maybe some simple sentences, some compound sentences. That's what good writers do. They change things up a little bit to keep the interest of the reader. Then you would follow it up with evidence. Our evidence was something to the effect of the King of England fined and put in prison anyone who did not go to his church. Then you're going to follow it up with a wrap-up. The wrap-up goes back to our thesis statement right here. Our thesis statement says the Pilgrims faced hardships that we know nothing of in today's times. So we have to make sure we end this second paragraph pointing out to our reader how our life is different about this topic, which centers around religion, than it was for these pilgrims. And our what we wrote was something to the effect of, today in America, we don't have to believe the same as our governor, and we don't get punished or for having different beliefs. In our government in America in 2017, the government doesn't care what church we go to. They don't even care if we go to church. You could even worship the devil if you want to. That's okay in our country as long as you don't break any laws. Once you or your church breaks a law, then it becomes, Aliyah, can you tell me why you're turning around while you're having a conversation with Austin when you should be facing this way and listening? So don't make me have to speak to you again about it. That's twice. So please pay attention. Plus, you were gone yesterday, so you weren't even here to hear about yesterday. So be listening, please. So back to where I was at before I got interrupted again. You make sure you point out to your reader what they need to know, what your point of your second paragraph is. Okay, now I have an example to show you right here. I want you to look at your second feather, actually. And I'm going to read this second paragraph to you in this example, and I want you to see if you can hear and see how that second feather progresses. To begin with, it starts, I hear it, that's a transition phrase. We talked about that yesterday. Make sure you use transition phrases where it's appropriate when you are giving information to your reader, because it helps them sequence. Everybody look up here. Don't just ignore. Just pay attention up here. To begin with, the Pilgrims faced punishment and mistreatment in England. Does that sound familiar? Look at your feather. Is that the topic sentence? Yes. So you can choose how you will start your second paragraph. This person started with a transition phrase and just coming right out and telling us the first reason. The King of England would fine and punish anyone who did not share his beliefs and go to his church. Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Yep, that's the background or the evidence. Then I see today, so there's another transition. That alerts the reader that, oh, I better listen because now this person is going to point out to me something that's different today than was back whenever these, in this case, when these pilgrims lived in 1621. Today in America, we do not have to believe the same as our government. We are free to have our own religious beliefs without getting hauled off to jail. We have so much freedom that the mistreatments the pilgrims faced are beyond our understanding. So, does that sound familiar? Does that look like our wrap-up sentence or the wrap-up info we wrote? Yes. And then this particular author added in some of their own thoughts here, which makes their paragraph even better. They said, we have so much freedom that the mistreatments the pilgrims faced are beyond our understanding. So they're telling us we don't even have any idea what it would have been like to be these pilgrims back in these days. It doesn't even make sense to us. If you walked into your church, do you expect somebody to be there to arrest you because you're going to church? No, we can't even understand that. So that shows how it's different now than it was in 1621. All right, then we're going to go on to our third paragraph, which, let me decrease this here, says, uncomfortable conditions of the Mayflower. Now look at my example up here. I did not write this. Somebody else wrote this. Is this an actual sentence? Uncomfortable conditions of the Mayflower? Does that even make sense to be a sentence? No, that's a phrase. Now that's okay that we have a phrase on our organizer, but whoever wrote this actually put a period here, which is totally wrong. But if you wrote in phrases on your organizer, that's okay. But then remember, when you start typing, you need to make sure you type in a complete sentence. Make sure you type in a complete sentence when you start typing. All right, then we've got evidence. We found our evidence for uncomfortable conditions on the Mayflower. The pilgrims loaded up on a ship with more than 100 people. The conditions were crowded, dark, and cold. The children had to stay in the cabin because of the weather. Now, I think we did a better job filling out our third feather than this person did, because we had a lot more evidence than this person, didn't we? And so when you go to write your third paragraph, make sure you include everything that we wrote. Don't take anything out. Be very specific and detailed, because this is informational writing that you are telling your reader about. Our topic is pilgrims, the hardships they faced. All right, then we get to our wrap-up sentence. Remember, that goes back to our thesis statement. We're reminding our reader, giving them the evidence, the reminder of, see, I told you, pilgrims, it was harder to be a pilgrim on a boat than it is now to go on a cruise ship. Our wrap-up sentence, our wrap-up evidence was something like, today's ships have electricity. This person says children today would never be treated that way. But I remember we wrote so many that I was even going down into the turkey head when I was writing. Didn't we write a lot more than that? Yes. So when you go to write your third paragraph, make sure you include all the evidence, everything that we wrote. Make sentences out of it. You can combine ideas. You can add even more details. If there's more that you want to write that you don't even have on your third feather, go ahead and add it. But whatever you add, make sure it stays on the topic. Okay, here's the example. Right here, the example paragraph. Another hardship, so I see a transition. This person's pointing out to the reader that I'm going to tell you another thing now. Another hardship the pilgrims went through that few in America have ever faced is uncomfortable conditions on a ship. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, that was a different way to say what we wrote in our feather for the first for the reason for the topic sentence. The Pilgrims were overcrowded, cramped in a dark space, and had little food. Does that sound familiar? Yep, that's some of the evidence that we wrote down. Now, if I were typing this one, I would add another sentence or two after this, because I know I have more information on my feather than this person has. So make sure you include everything we talked about. It will make your writing better. Today on luxury ships. So there's a transition. It's alerting me as the reader that, oh, I better pay attention because this person's going to tell me about life on a ship today in America. The food is endless with lots of room to roam along with lights and heat. Now, we said a lot of that, but if I were writing this, this is where I would add another couple sentences to make sure I added the other stuff that we put in on our organizer, because we had a lot. Today, there's another transition phrase. We can only picture what they went through since our experiences are so different. That is a really good conclusion sentence. Actually, that sentence could work at the end of the second paragraph or the third paragraph. Don't use the same conclusion sentence in all three paragraphs, though. You want to change it up. You don't want to sound like a robot. Okay, then our fourth feather is the third reason that we said Pilgrims have it harder than we do. And we said something to the effect of Pilgrims experience sickness and death in America. Does that sound familiar? Does that look like what we wrote? Yep. Our evidence. After the Pilgrims arrived in America, they immediately started working. Food was scarce, the weather was turning cold, and many got sick and died. Now, if I were writing this, when I put this all into my paragraph, I would probably be thinking, what questions might the reader have for me? And when I say food was scarce, I'm thinking they might say, what do you mean food was scarce? Why was food scarce? So I might add some more details to explain to my reader why I'm saying that. And I would say something about, well, first of all, they were about out of food from being the food that they packed on their boat 9 weeks ago is about gone. So they're out of food almost. And then when they landed in Plymouth, Massachusetts, they landed in a climate that they're not sure what will grow in that climate or what will grow in that soil. And they have no food right now and not a food supply working. This might also be where I might add info about Squanto. Raise your hand who remembers what Squanto did. Why was Squanto their lifesaver, Tika? How does he get credit for saving their lives? Well, before that even. Aubrey.
He teaches them how to play.
Yes. He's from this area. He came out of the woods and he saw them and he said, I will help you. I will teach you what foods grow here, how to make sure your crops grow more food for you. And so he taught them all of that. That would be a good place where you can tell your readers something about Squanto. It goes with the topic of this paragraph because he's the reason they didn't all get sick and die. Yes, some of them did, but not all of them. Okay, then our wrap-up goes back to our thesis statement. Today we have heat that keeps us warm in the winter and tools to help us build houses. We have hospitals and doctors to keep us well. That should sound sort of familiar. We have some of that there. Now here's the example that I have for you that somebody wrote. Now look at how this starts. It's got a good transition from the last paragraph about the Mayflower and how hard it was to live on the Mayflower into this paragraph, which will be about how hard it is to live where they landed in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And it says, along with pleasant conditions on the Mayflower, the Pilgrims faced sickness and death their first year in America. Does that sound familiar? Yes, that's your topic of this paragraph. Many men and women died the first year, and Squanto, a Native American, now who knows what's missing right here? What mark? Say it. Comma. Yeah, whoever wrote this example, they left out a comma. It should be here, and that's what we're learning this week in our language class. Squanto, a Native American, helped them to survive. So this person added Squanto in there.